good day. This is Scott Spears, and I'd like to welcome you to a new radio and television hybrid called The Exchange. What is exciting to you? Well, I'll tell you what's exciting to me. It's kicking off a new talk show with a lot of great pals and a lot of giants in the broadcast industry. Joining me today, we have former WMRN, former WDIF, and current WDCM radio personality, the man responsible for Buckeye Chuck, Charlie Evers. We have former WSYX TV, former WCMH TV, plus a station in Dayton that I can't remember the name of. Marianne will have to fill me in on later. And WMRN radio personality, Marianne Michaels. And of course, the guy who kept you up on Channel 10 for a lot of years, earned 5 Emmys in the process. Fritz the Night Owl, also a lot of jazz radio programming over the years. Going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to be on daily for 30 minutes, so stick with us and we're going to have a lot of fun. Before we go anywhere today, we want to let you know what day it is. It is Monday, April the 11th, 2011, and today's episode of The Exchange is brought to you by Peacock Water Conditioning. Our mission is simple. They want you to love your water. 1800 Marion Marysville Road, Marion, Ohio, also located in Bucyrus. Call them at 740-387-6312. Also brought to you today by Bubby Man's Games. Buy, sell, trade new and vintage games. 131 West Center Street, right here in Marion. Call them at 740-341-7009. Open Tuesday through Saturday, noon to 8 p.m., closed Sunday and Monday. The Ohio Neck and Back Pain Relief Centers, Scott M. Gray, D.C., and I thought I had that wrong, but that's Doctor of Chiropractics, across from the Marion Center between TSC and Kroger, 740-386-6580, and Night Owl Theater, located on the net at www.fritzlives.com. To receive email updates, email nightowltv@yahoo.com, and that's NITEOWLTV@yahoo.com. We're going to kick things off on this Monday with This Day in History with Charlie Evers.
All right, and a lot of things have taken place in the past week or so. A bomb exploded at a popular discotheque that was frequented by American military personnel in West Berlin. It killed 2 of our soldiers and a Turkish woman. American intelligence analysts attributed the attack to guess who? Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. 9 days later, President Ronald Reagan ordered a retaliatory airstrike that is, against Libya. African-American educator Booker T. Washington was born a slave in Franklin County, Virginia, and then freed by the Civil War. He taught himself the alphabet and graduated from an agricultural institute. And in June of 1881, he was asked to become the principal new training person for blacks at Tuskegee, Alabama. Now, after a break of 1,500 years, the first Olympics of the modern era was held in Athens, Greece. Following a vote by Congress approving a declaration of war, the U.S. entered World War I in Europe. And one of those voting to enter the war was Marion's President Warren G. Harding. At that time, Senator Harding.
Very interesting, Charlie. Now, I got to ask you this. Gaddafi, what's his first name?
His first name is Muammar.
Muammar. Now, I've heard Muammar, Omar, and last night I heard Piers Morgan call him Gaddafi. Now, what's his name? Is it Muammar Gaddafi?
It's M-U-A-M-M-A-R.
Marianne, jump in. How do you pronounce this man's name?
Okay, let me see it. Where is it?
Well, I've heard Muammar also.
Muammar. I've heard Omar.
Muammar.
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 Muammar Gaddafi.
Gaddafi. But they also sometimes say Gaddafi instead of Gaddafi. So, maybe the Muslim world pronounces a different way from what we do.
Right.
So
he won't be getting a Christmas card from me, so at this point, what difference does it make? So we're going to move on with the flick pick with a man who knows a lot about movies, Fritz the Night Owl.
Thanks, Scott. Well, you know, I've been going to movies since about 1939, 1940. So on this, I'm going to try to avoid the pictures that everybody always talks about, the Gone with the Winds, the Casablancas, the Titanic, Adavar, all of those. I want to talk about more or less pictures that are, in a way, timeless. They may be on a scale of, say, 5 stars. They might be 3-star pictures there, but they're kind of timeless. They hold up well, and you and the family will enjoy them. I'm trying to avoid also the stars that you hear about all the times, the Katharine Hepburns, the Meryl Streeps, the Jack Nicholsons, because, again, they're covered quite well. And so I just want to bring you some films that may have been forgotten over the years, or maybe you've not heard of, or just ones that you can rent and will enjoy. The one I'm going to go with is from 1940, and is probably, in my view, the greatest fantasy film ever made, and it's called The Thief of Baghdad. It's won Oscars for stunning Technicolor special effects, art direction, and again, the special effects. This was in the days before there was CGI and all of the digital excitement you can do now. This was when it was pretty simple, but it's an Arabian Nights kind of story, and it's got it's magical, it's dazzling, it's imaginative. It's got flying horses, gigantic genies coming out of a bottle. It's got an emerald, all-seeing eye, huge statues. Just about everything on this is perfect. The script, the performances, the color, the lights, the effects, and just about anybody from age 6 to 300 will enjoy this movie even now. As mentioned, it was made in 1940, and it starred an actor by the name of Sabu, S-A-B-U, originally called The Elephant Boy, which was his first movie in about 1937. He was born in India, but became a U.S. citizen and was enormously popular throughout his film career, which was about 37 all the way through the early 60s. Ask your grandmama, grandpapa, because they probably saw an early Sabu movie. Anyway, this is The Thief of Baghdad, and there's no blood, there's no guts, there's no gore, there's no dismembering, none of the things that seem to be so popular these days. This is just a fun, fast action. There's romance, there's comedy, there's drama, there's magic, there's mystery. It's got everything, and I recommend it most highly. I give it 5 stars out of 5, even though it is about 1940. This is 71 years old. An incredible movie, recommended highly. Thief of Baghdad, and the actor's name is Sabu. Also very, very popular in a movie a couple of years later he made called, he was in the original Jungle Book as Mowgli. And he must have been about 16, 17 years old then. He was about 15, 16 years old when he made this. Sabu, The Thief of Baghdad, 1940, 5 stars. Check it out. I'm sure you'll enjoy.
So it's on DVD?
I think so. I think it's on DVD, VHS. Even gets some later release theatrically. It still shows up every 10 or so years in theaters.
You know, I get a little bit of chills when I hear Fritz talk over here. Doesn't he have one of the great voices?
Sure does.
Fritz, have you always had that?
I was lucky in that the voice changed in about 6th, 7th grade. But again, I grew up in the era when radio was enormously popular. And so like a lot of the kids in those days just practiced imitating the people they heard on radio. Some of my influences, even when I do a commercial or voiceover or what have you, I know what I've borrowed from Howard Duff, whom I thought was the world's greatest radio voice. Howard Duff was radio Sam Spade. I borrowed from Jeff Chandler, who was he was Michael Shane on radio. I borrowed from Walter Cronkite, Dean Martin, Rory Calhoun, a whole bunch of people. And then, of course, you bring it through your own filter and your own thing. And but the voice, as I say, changed early on, and it's just one of the. I have this Victor Mature voice coming out of a Woody Allen body. shows that God has a sense of humor.
That's a line. That's a line.
Yeah.
Now, I was always told when I went into radio that you talk from the chest and not the mouth. True, Charlie?
That's true. Your diaphragm, I guess you would call it, you have to push a lot out of there. There are too many people that in public speak like in just normal conversation. But in order to be heard, now you can imagine Warren G. Harding standing on his front porch talking to 50,000 people. He didn't do that like this.
No.
Right.
Well, you know, I keep hearing this term, and I've heard it in my short time in radio voice. I've never understood it. People say you have a radio voice. I don't know what that means.
Some people say you have a good radio face.
Yeah, we all have those, except Marianne. Except Marianne.
No, actually, isn't it a deepness, a tenor that's...
The 30s and the 40s.
Yes.
For example, like at WBNS, when I started there, you had to sound like the early worm, Erwin Johnson, who was the #1 morning man, and he had a nice, deep, relaxing, easygoing voice and style. And to get on the BNS team back there in the 40s and 50s, you kind of had to sound like him, so it was almost like a family thing. Dean Lewis, the afternoon guy, sounded like him. Les Spencer did. Russ Cantor to a degree. Me, Bill Hamilton, and but it was that deep kind of voice. And again, real quickly, if you remember William Conrad from Jake and the Fat Man.
Yes, and Cannon.
Yeah, and he was the original radio voice for Matt Dillon. I'm that man.
But you know, a voice is important, not just to be on the radio, but I am very much turned off by, squeaky voices or high, tenor voices. And for example, no, I guess I better not say that.
Do they work or live in this viewing area, Mary?
No.
Then go for it.
No, I'm thinking of Sarah Palin. Her voice drives me nuts. Her voice drives me nuts. I'm sorry.
It took 5 minutes into this program to get around to Sarah Palin. Remember that.
Well, but it is. Have you ever noticed how she gets way up there and...
She was on TV, I believe. Started as a TV
yes, she
person.
Did. She was in news.
Really?
That's right. She started out in news.
I've never felt that the voice was all that important.
Oh, it's important.
You think?
Oh,
really?
Definitely.
I don't know. I think curiosity.
Particularly in the early days of radio when the transmission wasn't that good and the equipment wasn't that good, you had to overact, I think, a little bit and speak a little more clearly and distinctly and less conversationally.
But I'm talking about ordinary people.
No, but I think that I think people can also. I think the voice is a muscle.
Yes,
you can train it to go lower to a degree or higher if you want.
And I like to be around people who have nice voices that aren't real squeaky and whiny. Oh, I don't like whiny voices.
Yeah, but that's kind of something I think that they've picked up over. That is, I don't think it's a natural thing.
You don't?
The whiny thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think it's almost like an accent.
So in other words, it can be correct.
It can be correct.
It's a mentally motivated thing.
I think you might be right. I thought what we do in this first episode, instead of going after a current event or having any specific line of small talk, what we would do, because we've got a lot of broadcasting legends up here, let's ask some questions about them. Charlie, how did you break into the business for people who don't know?
It was a rather
Both of you.
a meager break-in. I was a ham radio operator, and I knew some of the engineers that worked at WMRN here. And I told them I'd sure like to get into radio. I was, of course, in high school at the time, and they did give me a job managing the one knob amplifier for the high school reporter program. I was the little engineer. After I graduated, I begged the chief engineer down here, can I just cut the grass? I want to be in radio. I'll cut the grass. So I was hired as a night watchman.
Really?
And for almost a year, I worked from midnight till the sign-on in the morning, carrying a gun to ward off thieves who were stealing at that time a lot of equipment from radio stations. The equipment eventually ended up in a Quonset hut in Cincinnati and was shipped on to South America to pirate radio. But when they caught the guys, my job was done as a night watchman.
So you didn't catch them?
No.
Where were you at, Charlie, when they were taking this stuff out?
I was sitting in the control room, and when the teletype machine came on, it sounded like somebody thumping across the floor. and I had a shotgun across my lap, and I would jump up, and I was ready to go.
You were asleep?
Well, not quite. Sometimes, maybe, but yeah, that was and then I worked for 15 years carrying audio equipment to remote broadcasts, so the engineer could step up like this and just take over and read or do whatever, while I was in the background sweating and carrying equipment. And I thought, someday,
You paid your dues.
yes, someday I'm going to be the person they're going to carry equipment for. I never was. Because
What a
when I
tragedy.
became an announcer, they went combo, it was called, combination engineer announcer. So I carried my equipment and talked at the same time.
Wow.
First morning on the air, what was it? What were you doing?
I was doing the early morning show. I was asked, since I had been the engineer on that show for 15 years, I was asked to, Evers, you might as well take over while I'm on vacation, said the program director, because you know the procedure and everything, go ahead. And so I did, and he came back from vacation. He says, good enough, you're on, you're the morning guy.
Were you scared your first morning on?
Well, no.
You were over it by that point.
Oh, yes.
Marianne, tell us your story. How'd you break in?
Well, I started junior high. I had my own little program on Saturday.
Girl talk or something?
Yeah, well, it was girls, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was on WWVA in Wheeling, West Virginia. And I think I was in the 8th grade. And it was Calling All Girls. And it was just a little short segment that I did on things that the girls my age would be interested in, like fashions and places to go and what to do and so forth and so on. And I loved it. It was just wonderful. Then in high school, of course, I was in plays, and college, I was in plays, and I belonged to little theaters, and I was always kind of a ham, really. But I went to a teacher's college. That's all I could afford. It was very close to home. And when I graduated, I became a teacher, and I was a teacher for 18 years. And I just had a wonderful opportunity to get into television. I went for an audition in Dayton. It was WDTV.
DTV.
WDTN TV. And I was hired, and I did a special program in the morning, and I was on the newscast, and was there for a year. But I had to commute every weekend back and forth. And of course, my son was only 9 years old. My husband was wonderful. He took care of everything while I was gone. It was getting to be not too good. And I thought, I can't, I loved it. But my family was first. So I went back to teaching in Marion City Schools. But then I still had this yearning, for television. And so I got an appointment with the news director in WCMH. It was called WCLC when I was there. And
WLWC.
WLWC, right. It was the Avco broadcasting
Right, they had like
system.
5 stations.
They had 5 stations. Cincinnati, right, and
Dayton.
right.
Yeah.
And I was there, and I was there for about 6 years, and I was wooed to WMRN by George Oakham and John Courtwright, and I was there for about 6 years. And when they were selling the radio station, I decided I wanted to go back to teaching, and I ended up retiring with 30 years teaching and 14 years of broadcasting.
But you're back today.
I'm back today.
You're back today.
Well, yes, kind of, I guess.
Well, I hope so. Fritz, tell us your story.
Well, I grew up, as I mentioned, in the 40s when we used to listen to radio was a major form of entertainment, and we had shows like Sam Spade and Michael Sheen and Charlie McCarthy and Edgar Bergen and Jack Benny, and there were mysteries and dramas and comedies and musical shows. And radio was the second, movies probably topped radio in audience, and then radio was probably second. So the voice changed early on, and formula had not hit radio yet, and so I thought, hey, I've got the voice, I could be a radio actor, which was quite valid in those days, quite viable. And so when I went to Ohio State, I did the theater in high school and all of that to get a little bit of presence. And then I went to Ohio State and I majored in radio, TV, theater. Ohio State at that time, 52 through 57, was a very good performance school in that we had radio announcing was, they had 3 5-hour courses, 15 hours totally, just in radio announcing. And we would also do performing, like we would put on shows. We got a script from Sam Spade and we would cast it and we would do radio shows. But we'd have like an hour a day, 5 days a week, of where we would go in and there would just be a big book of commercials and news and music intros. And we, for an hour a day, class of maybe 15 people, we'd sit there and take turns reading commercials, and the guy would say, you punch this up, you back off on this, a little harder here. And so I learned there. Then I went to the Army. After I graduated, I got my Bachelor of Science in Secondary Education, English and Speech as my majors. Got drafted, went to the Army, and because I'd been in radio, TV in college and had worked at TV as a floor director, that is behind the scenes, they put me into writing movies, narrating movies, acting in movies for the Army in the old Paramount Studios in New York City. And that was like a master's or a doctorate. I learned so much there that had they guaranteed that I would stay there, I would have re-enlisted for 4 years, but the Army wouldn't do that kind of guarantee. When I got out of the Army, I went around, I made the rounds, auditioned, and they had a catch-22. Everybody said, gee, we love your voice, we love your style, but we won't hire you unless you've had commercial radio experience. And I'd say, well, how do you get to, and they wouldn't count the radio like you did at Ohio State or in school. I said, well, how do you get radio experience, commercial radio experience, if no commercial station will hire you without that experience? So they go, catch-22 early on. But I was working at an ad agency as a writer and an artist, and I had to go to WMNI to pick up a photograph of their sportscaster for a poster I was making. Lex Mayer Chevrolet was sponsoring the OSU basketball games, and Eddie Lane was the MNI sportscaster who was doing. So I went there, and I just happened to get there. The program director is sitting in for the receptionist because it was their break time or something. And I said, I'm here to pick up a picture of Eddie Lane. And he gives it to me. He says, hey, have you ever been on radio? And instantly, the moment of truth hit me square in the eyes. I'd never been on radio. Oh, yeah, sure.
There you go.
And he said, well, we're looking for somebody to do the Saturday night sign-off and the Sunday night sign-on, which was essentially babysitting with remote shows because they were a big rock and roll station at the time. And Saturday night, they would do a big rock and roll, what do you call it where the DJ plays records? Record hop.
From
Vets Memorial with their 4 DJs. And so I would just babysit, but if something went wrong, I'd have to say, you're listening to WMNI, you're far higher top of the Southern Hotel. And then on Sunday morning, I had to babysit all of the remote church broadcasts and the live pictures that would come in. And if they would lose the remote, then I would have to do fill-in broadcasting. So they kind of liked the way I did that. So when an opening came up for a DJ shift, they offered it to me. I got it. And then 2 years later, when WMNI went on, or when WBNS FM went on the air live, they said, hey, you've had commercial experience, we like your voice, and they hired me, no audition, nothing.
In the essence of time, we're normally going to have a mailbag question on this show. We're going to have to forego that today. We might continue this conversation tomorrow. It's a very interesting conversation.
We need to talk about you.
Well, we need to talk about where the glasses came from, where Buckeye Chuck came from. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. But if you have a mailbag question, anything you want to ask this panel, you can do that by joining us on Facebook under the name Scott Spears, or you can email them to irmcommunication@gmail.com. Now, we want to have a little celebration today on our first episode. Do we have the little celebration ready from the back room in there? Do we have the celebration? Maybe we don't have the celebration ready. We might celebrate tomorrow.
Cue the back room.
Cue the back room. They're not coming. We might have a celebration tomorrow. You know how we're going to end today? Charlie, tell me the story. WMRN, you're hosting the very popular show Tradio. Somebody calls in about a dog. Clean it up for us. Let's go.
Well, we would read or take phone calls like is done, and also read cards. And one card read, I would like to sell a Shih Tzu. And only I mispronounced it a little. And after After Tradio was off, no, I think it was still during Tradio, a man called up and said, "Does that dog come with papers?"
On that note, for the first episode of The Exchange, for Fritz the Night Out, Charlie Evers, Mary Ann Michaels, I'm Scott Spears. See you tomorrow.
So that we should act like we're talking
I know
about
we're going to something about
I mean, that's...